Thank you all for attending today's webinar. We are going to be starting the presentation within the next minute. We're just going to give a couple more attendees to log on. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the BankNews Media webinar series. My name is Afton Rodriguez with BankNews Media, and it is my pleasure to host today's webinar, Third-Party Risk Management at VyStar Credit Union, sponsored by ProcessUnity. I would like to take a moment to thank you all today for attending today's webinar. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions using the questions function on your screen when they arise. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and everyone registered will receive a link to access the recording. Today's webinar will go more in depth about what an automated vendor risk management program looks like and how a strong process combined with automation will help you assess more vendors in less time. The webinar will include information on VyStar's approach to selecting the right vendor risk management system for their needs and regulatory requirements. VyStar will also speak about the results within their organization of implementing an automated vendor risk management system, including future enhancements VyStar will be completing to take their program to the next level. Our presenters today are Franchesca Williams and Mark Williams. Franchesca is a third-party risk management manager at VyStar Credit Union located in Jacksonville, Florida. She has a BS in Business Management from the University of Phoenix and has been in the financial industry for 15 years. She oversees and manages the day-to-day operations of the third-party risk management program at VyStar Credit Union. Mark Williams is the technical expert for the ProcessUnity sales team and prospect current customers. He has over 7 years of government risk and compliance experience. His career expands across supply chain management, warehouse management systems, customer relationship management, and governance, risk, and compliance, including vendor risk management. Now, please join me in welcoming Franchesca and Mark to the BankNews Media webinar series.
Thank you, Afton, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar this afternoon. We've got a great agenda with Franchesca Williams from VyStar Credit Union here to talk about third-party risk and building a best-in-class third-party program. I'd like to give a quick overview of our company. ProcessUnity is a leading SaaS provider of integrated risk management solutions, and as you can see, they include third-party risk management, policy and procedure management, risk management, and compliance management. We help both large and small companies automate and streamline the risk and compliance programs ranging from a variety of different levels of maturity within those organizations. We're headquartered just outside of Boston in Concord, Massachusetts. We have a 99.9% system uptime over the last 10 years, and we're extremely proud of our 94.3% customer retention rate. Next slide, please. We want to take a look at third-party risk itself and how it fits into overall third-party management. Taking a look at the process overview, when we're talking about onboarding a new vendor, the process starts with the business submitting a request for a product or service. Once that request has been submitted, it moves to procurement, and procurement identifies whether it's an existing or new vendor, and if it happens to be a large purchase, if it needs to go through the process of selection in order to identify what the best product and or service is. After procurement does the selection process, two things happen in parallel. One, you need to ensure or vet that the vendor is managing the type of product or service and that they're going to be providing it adequately and in compliance. You need to be able to understand the types of risks they pose to your organization based on the type of data that they're going to be using, as well as the type of criticality that that service or product is to your business. You have to vet the vendor from a risk management perspective. And then number two, as I said, in parallel, there's contract negotiations, SLAs, et cetera, that are going on as well. They need to be put in place to ensure that those risks are protected and that the contract is set up for the delivery of that product and or service. Once all of that has been executed, you've done your risk management and executed your contract, then it gets turned over to your transaction system or your ERP system where you start your ongoing monitoring process. Within ongoing monitoring, and after the vendor has been onboarded, you have several different owners involved in the process. Procurement, risk management, and the business. Now you're trying to monitor the ongoing risk and the contract as well as the performance of the product or service being supplied to the business. So when the contract renewal comes up, you're able to better negotiate new contract terms, including better pricing, better delivery of service, etc. It's important to do the risk management process because once you do execute the contract, you have shared your critical data and or doing a critical part of your business process, and you are now live and there's no going back, right? So we look at this as a preventative control in place when you're doing the onboarding to assure that you have got the risks identified and you verified that you've got your legal terms and provisions in place to protect against any incident or issue that may arise after you execute the contract. Of course, all of this happens in a very sensitive fashion because the business needs the product and or service. There tends to be a lot of pressure on the risk management group to do the vetting as fast and as accurate as possible. Of course, there are a lot of variations within this model, but I think this articulates a standard way that most organizations are going through their third-party management lifecycle and where the risks and contracts fit into that process. As we move to the next slide, we drill into risk management itself and what the risk management team is doing when they go to vet that particular third party. A couple of things that you're looking to do is to identify the type of service that it is so you can understand exactly how critical and how confidential the type of data you might be using with that particular vendor is to your organization. You're really trying to identify the inherent risk for that type of service and the type of data being used with the vendor that you're about to be in contracts with. Once you identify the inherent risk or the unmitigated exposure to your organization, you can then determine review scope to scope down based on the type of service and what exactly you will be asking of this third party, as well as what you are going to be assessing for the third party based on the type of service. Just as an example, many times it doesn't make sense to ask cloud security questions for a product or service that doesn't involve the cloud. In that example, any of those related questions on the assessment would be de-scoped. You want to be targeted with your questions so that you reduce noise and unneeded questions in the assessment process and focus your review for the type of information that is relevant. By de-scoping irrelevant questions, you also help reduce vendor fatigue and ensure that the vendor can easily get into the assessment through a vendor portal, complete that assessment, and submit it back to you for your review. Really, where we see a lot of organizations looking to automate and streamline their processes is in the review process. It can be a very timely consuming process to gather data from the third party or from other data sources from the internet, or aggregate data from providers like BitSight, Security Scorecard, or Thomson Reuters, and then be able to pull that data into your risk program and have the subject matter expertise and experts able to assess the data. We see a lot of our clients are looking to streamline and enhance the review times and the cycle times it takes to review and assess those vendors. Again, that includes collecting the data, evaluating and interpreting the data, and just how fast and streamlined we can make that process. In the end, it's going to reduce our time to onboard and also give us much better accuracy, excuse me, in the risk review process that we're performing. Next slide, please. So when we look at the different organizations, at where different organizations are in their maturity model, and I think Franchesca will go into this in more detail around her program, wherever you start out in your program, whether you're starting out manual without technology, or you have an informal program or management is starting to be aware of it, what you'll see in this slide is that the industry in general is maturing, and people are largely trying to get away from the spreadsheets, the emails, the SharePoint, where you're trying to manage the assessments in different documents. They realize that trying to evaluate third parties and the risk that is posed by some of the data that you're giving to them or some of the critical services that you're outsourcing are too important to be mismanaged in spreadsheets, email, and a file system with poor visibility and reporting capabilities. I think we're seeing that examiners and regulators prefer to see something structured, and a program that involves identifying the risks, also involves the business, has workflow, and has robust reporting capabilities involved with it. So there's a lot of different areas that you can look at from within one of your programs, whether you're in a reactive state trying to get to proactive, whether you're in proactive trying to get optimized. Typically, we see clients going from one stage to the next and not trying to skip, so that you have time as you enhance your program over time, and you can continuously enhance, because third-party risk is not going to go away anytime soon. It's also very important that you're able to understand the changes to your program, communicate them out to the lines of business, to management, and to your audit firms, and then make additional changes and enhancements as you go forward and your program matures. From our perspective, we definitely see where our customers or clients are in their maturity levels. Some are usually between informal and proactive and trying to move forward with improvements and enhancements in their respective programs for accuracy and coverage, and in reducing the cycle times to actually perform those assessments. That's just a little bit of an overview on the process and some context we are seeing in the industry around third-party management. Now I'm happy to turn it over to Franchesca Williams so that she can give you more information around her program, how she got through the process of making the selection, and some of the requirements that she had. Franchesca, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate that. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate everybody joining the webinar to really take a good look at VyStar Credit Union's third-party risk management journey and how we came to the point we are today in our program. I'm Franchesca Williams, obviously, as Afton had spoke to previously. And I have been with VyStar Credit Union actually for most of my financial industry career. And I'm just going to go over a little bit about VyStar Credit Union real quick, and then we'll jump into the other slides. So VyStar Credit Union actually began in 1952, and we really served a majority of the military membership base, and we really didn't expand until the 1990s to all of the membership base, meaning we can serve any members out there in the industry and in the market. We support now communities throughout Central and North Florida, as well as Southeast Georgia counties. We are considered the largest auto lender in Northeast Florida, including dealers. We are the second largest mortgage lender in North Florida. We're the fourth largest financial institution in North Florida, assets of $8.5 billion, serving over 650,000 members. And we are considered the 17th largest credit union in the nation, totaling almost out of 5,800 credit unions. And we are the 14th largest employer in North Florida, employing over 1,500 employees today. And we are growing rapidly, so our employee base is growing as well. Next slide, please. So enough about VyStar. We're going to kind of go through the selection process that I experienced trying to find a third-party risk management system for our organization that would work for our needs. And so a lot of that had to do with what were our key requirements for selection. A lot of things that I was looking for in a system was a system that would provide automation and efficiency gains for the organization, considering we took a lot of time to go through the risk assessment, due diligence processes on manual spreadsheets prior. As Mark had alluded to, a lot of companies start out there and then they go to select a third-party risk management system. We were in that same boat when we first began, and it was a very manual process, and it took a lot of time, and I really only have 2 people on my team at the time, so it was a lot of work for a portfolio of 300 to 400 third parties. So we had made the decision to finally go out and get a system to help us support that process. One of the other key requirements that we were looking for is that it definitely needed to meet regulatory requirements for the third-party risk management program here at VyStar Credit Union and those that align with the NCUA, National Credit Union Administration, and the FFIEC. That is a tall order at times, so given that it requires a full program from beginning to end, they go through all of the requirements from planning to risk assessment, due diligence, contract reviews, ongoing monitoring, all the way through termination of a life cycle for a vendor. It was a lot of work for a team of 2 to do, so that was something that we needed to look at heavily when we were selecting a third-party risk management system. We also needed something that was flexible enough for us to be able to configure on our own. A lot of systems that we looked at were not configurable. They were customizable, and the difference to me is that VyStar can actually make some changes to the system itself versus you would have to go out and ask your vendor to make those changes for you on a lot of easy things, such as I just need to change the name of this field, et cetera. And we needed that flexibility to fit with our program for the future as we continue to see regulatory environment change and the requirements of the regulations changing as well. We also needed to be able to manage the workload of our current organization and the growth that we're experiencing. So those were some of the key requirements that we were focusing on when we were going through the vendor selection process. Next slide, please. So part of our selection process was I first had to figure out what participants we wanted to include in our RFP or our request for proposal process. That is a mouthful. And a lot of that had to do with going out and seeing what was out there, because it was my first time ever trying to select a system for our organization, and there are a lot of systems and options that are out there for third-party risk management. So we went through a list of a lot of different systems that were available. We looked at the Gartner Magic Quadrant to also look for a provider, and we included those in our selection process. We looked at over 50 systems in a impromptu demo just to kind of take a look and see what they had to offer, and we narrowed it down to 5 different participants that we wanted to include in this process. We began that request for proposal process in mid-2017, around June, and then we made a selection in just about 8 weeks later, in September of 2017, based on the ability to meet all of our requirements and the ability to demonstrate the application to show that they met those requirements. Next slide, please. So you may ask, why did we select ProcessUnity out of all of the different providers that we actually evaluated? There were several reasons that we actually selected ProcessUnity. ProcessUnity met a majority of our requirements. Almost 99% of those requirements on our list were met by ProcessUnity and the ability and functionality that they offered in their system. They had many tools to assist us in meeting our regulatory requirements for third-party risk management. To name a few, that would be they had the ability to provide questionnaires automated for us to go out to our internal clients as well as our external clients. making that process more efficient for us. They had the ability to help us configure the system to conduct contract reviews internally and externally with our providers. They had the ability to help us with a signing process. They had the ability to assist us with an intake process for our program, meaning a request process. And they had the ability to help us configure to meet all of the requirements from end to end, cradle to grave, as they would say, for our programs, from planning all the way through termination. So there's a lot of different tools within the system, but I think the best tool I've found so far is definitely the ability to automate those questionnaires for us and create that efficiency gain for my team, because it took quite some time for us to complete those internally and externally to get responses even on a lot of that. Another thing was it was definitely flexible now and for the future as we continue to grow here at VyStar. I see new challenges, and I see a lot of people that use the system, and I get requests daily of how we can do things better and more efficient. And of course, ProcessUnity has helped me with that throughout that flexibility to be able to change things pretty quickly. Instead of having to submit a ticket to ProcessUnity, I can just go behind the scenes in the settings and make that change very quickly for myself. And it's sometimes a 5-minute fix, and sometimes it's literally a minute for me just to click one box and click or unclick one box in the fields that are provided behind the scenes in the settings area. They presented well in the demo, so they were able to actually demonstrate what they stated they were able to meet in the requirements, which was a huge thing for me. There was a lot of providers that would tell me that they're able to do this and that, and then they were not actually able to deliver in the demo. So that was big for me to be able to actually visually see the potential as I was building the program and thinking about how I could automate this or that throughout that demonstration that ProcessUnity was able to give us. It was configurable, like I said prior, by us and not by the third party. It has a lot of notifications and workflows, which has allowed us to have some efficiency gains as well, because we no longer have to send manual emails. And the workflows allow us to send automatic notifications for, hey, it's time to do this or it's time to do that, depending on what the task may be. And then, of course, it gave us the ability to communicate with our third parties via the system rather than having to send an email out and follow up and have plenty of phone calls and other methods, of course, that are out there to be able to get a hold of your vendors to do what they need to do. But the system allowed us to be able to contact them through the system and also create escalation points for our internal clients to say, hey, your third party is not responding, we need your assistance. And a lot of times that will prompt our internal clients to give them a call, because of course they want to onboard a vendor as quickly as possible. As Mark alluded to, a lot of people really want this process to go quickly so they can go ahead and get to the implementation phase with their vendors. And a lot of times that is where we see a lot of holdup, and it's a challenge for the risk management group really to move through that process quickly when we don't have the communication and the participation from the third parties. And how we overcame that, like I said, was to create these notifications and allow these notifications to go to our clients internally to at least notify them that we're having some struggles with your third party. And a lot of times that really gets them moving along because we get that participation from our line of business. Next slide, please. So as far as the implementation goes, we did a phased approach here at VyStar to be able to implement this throughout the organization, both internally and externally. The first phase was really just an 8 to 10 week implementation with ProcessUnity to configure the system the way we needed it to be. And then we spent that time also allowing my team to use that system just internally, getting the data into the system, et cetera, getting used to it, getting comfortable with it, before we decided to roll it out to a test pilot group within the organization. And what we did there was we chose a pilot group that we work a lot with, like IT or payments area, because we have a lot of contracts, we have a lot of vendors that we need to onboard in those areas, and it gave us an opportunity to really work through any things that were not working smoothly. Maybe the workflow wasn't going out correctly, pinging the right people, things like that. And that's all based on the configuration that I did with my implementation specialist at ProcessUnity. Sometimes there are things that you think are going to work a certain way, and of course, it's not how you envisioned it in your mind, and then when you put it out there to the people, you get a lot of suggestions and feedback. So we felt it was a good idea to really get a test group to work with us on that throughout the full process and really go through the implementation with us. Not to mention it helps with the buy-in across the organization with other groups because they had an opportunity to use it. They were really a selling point to the other clients that were going through the third phase implementation, which was the rest of the organization. We spent a lot of time doing training and making sure that all of these internal clients were comfortable with the system. We even created videos and tutorials for them through my training department to allow them to have some time with the material and get comfortable. And of course, we're always available on my team to support them when they have questions about the use of the system. But overall, we had a great implementation, and I've had a lot of buy-in from my internal clients. The one challenge that I came across while I was going through the middle of implementation that I had to really think creatively about was, how did we get the buy-in from the vendors to participate in using the vendor portal? There are a lot of nuances to third-party relationships when you work with each of the third parties that can keep you from using the system, whether that's a security concern from the third party, whether that's I don't want to use it. There's a lot of reasons I've seen across the board with regard to third parties saying they don't want to use it. I wanted to at least give an introduction to the vendor and make sure that they were comfortable with it. So one of the things that I thought of with my implementation specialist at ProcessUnity, trying to get creative and getting the buy-in, is so that way a third party doesn't receive a password automatically. They get a little something before they get the password, before they get the login, just to kind of welcome them to the vendor portal, help them understand where they have materials available to them to help them know how to use their portal. Is that we decided to create a notification that we could manually submit when we create the third-party profile. So when we're creating that contact for that third party, and that's the third-party contact that we're going to send the questionnaires to, we decided to create that notification, click on a button called Send Welcome Letter, for example, and it sends an email first to that third-party contact, welcoming them to the portal, telling them how to contact VyStar's vendor management group should they have issues trying to get into the portal, et cetera. It was just kind of a extra little something to help our third parties really get excited and get on board with using the portal up front rather than having problems and trouble and giving that negative perception right out of the gate. So that was something that we really did differently than what we had done in the past in trying to get buy-in from our external partners. It has helped in the use of the vendor portal for many of our third parties. There are still some that struggle with it, but a lot of those reasons are things that we can't get around. It's just a policy that they have internally, things like that we have to work through with them. So next slide, please. So how has ProcessUnity helped? The ProcessUnity system has really helped us manage the workloads of a team of 3. I mentioned earlier that we had a team of 2 when we started this process. We've increased to 3 people now. But managing 300 to 400 vendors with the help of the ProcessUnity system has really helped us put our program in place that can manage that many vendors from a cradle to grave concept. They help us complete tasks within the program more efficiently, such as the reduction of response time from internal clients on questionnaires required. So those are those risk assessments that we send out to our internal clients that we ask them to complete. Prior to ProcessUnity, we used manual spreadsheets that would not necessarily work all the time. They would get errors, and it would create some frustration for our internal clients. Now that we're using the questionnaires within the system, we literally see response times have increased, and they want to respond to the questionnaires rather than avoiding them like the plague. So that has been a great help. We've eliminated those manual spreadsheets. We've eliminated those issues, like I stated. We've eliminated the manual notification. So now we're using the system to notify all of our internal clients for all of the needs, such as I need you to complete this risk assessment. I need you to provide their certificate of insurance, things of that nature that we can reach out to the internal client to help us. They have also helped us manage the portfolio for all of the facets of third-party risk management program, like I said, from cradle to grave, that from that point of, I need help from you, third-party risk management, to onboard this vendor, which is a request, to all the way through termination. I want to end this partnership with this vendor. They have also helped us to support effectively meeting the regulatory requirements for the size of the portfolio from cradle to grave for the program, just as I mentioned prior. So there is a lot that ProcessUnity has helped us with, and I'm sure they're going to continue to help us as we continue to evolve our program here at VyStar. There are some things that we haven't been able to implement yet, but we are working towards that, and we're looking forward to working with ProcessUnity to do that. Next slide, please. So as part of this process, the results of ProcessUnity and working with them, on the left-hand side, it's the previous state that kind of shows you what we had in our program before, and it was really done on spreadsheets, Word documents, email, the normal tools that a lot of people use when they don't have a system, and then the current state, what we were able to implement and put into place and really use on the right-hand side. So again, we have an EVM lifecycle performed within the system from cradle to grave. A lot of the features we were able to implement was a request process for our program, which we never really had before. We just got emailed left and right, which was really hard to manage with this many providers that we have in our portfolio and all of our internal clients to date. We have system-generated questionnaires. We have automated notifications. We have workflow and approval processes. We're able to do contract review, negotiation, and signature process all within the system. We're able to use this as our contract repository, and we are able to use the vendor portal to communicate through the vendor dialogue function within ProcessUnity. Next slide. So what are the next steps for VyStar Credit Union? As part of the next steps for VyStar Credit Union, we are still working on getting our ongoing monitoring rolled out for all of our providers. We currently have it in the system for our critical providers. We are trying to roll that out for our high, medium, and low providers as well, just to ensure that we have everything covered for our audits. This is really one of the last pieces that we need to roll out, and that includes facilitating the SOC report retrieval and review, the financial report retrieval and review, the issue workflow management to get approval from the executive level should we have to get approval on a risk, service level metric monitoring, the contract management monitoring, the annual risk reviews, et cetera. And then some of the other things that we are looking into doing this year will be e-signature integration and implementation for the contracts with ProcessUnity. So that way we can get away from the manual wet signatures in the organization. And that's about everything that we've done thus far, and we have thoroughly enjoyed working with ProcessUnity and enjoyed the partnership that we've developed there, and feel that they're going to be a great help to us in getting this next phase completed. At that, I'll turn it over to Afton for questions.
Thank you, Francesca and Mark. We did have a few questions come through. The first one is, what was the biggest challenge with meeting regulatory requirements for NCUA?
Thank you, Afton. Sorry, I accidentally hit the mute button. So the biggest challenge for us meeting regulatory requirements for NCUA, I'd have to say the requirements of having a full program lifecycle to ensure that all third parties are risk ranked appropriately and completing ongoing monitoring continuously with manual spreadsheets and email. So again, that's a tall task to complete on 400 vendors. We are looking at using the system for notifications to monitor our third parties for all of the different items that we need to complete, such as SOC report reviews and getting current certificate of insurances from our third parties. So, but today we do have the system helping us meet the requirement for the questionnaires and properly risk ranking, because we have the risk methodology ingrained into the ProcessUnity system. So that has been a great help in just making sure that we have everything risk ranked properly to begin that journey on ongoing monitoring.
Thank you. Next question. Can we modify the questionnaire at any time?
Yeah, thank you, Afton. You can certainly modify the questionnaires at any time. The system was designed, as Franchesca kind of alluded to, for end users or business users to be able to manage it, and that includes modifying questionnaires at any point in time.
Thank you, Mark. Next question. Does the SIG come in multiple variations, for example, light and core?
It does. So again, this is Mark. It does come in both SIG full and SIG light. And we do have the ability to, if you don't have an agreement in place, we can license SIG through ProcessUnity. But if you do have something in place, then we can just use our connector to pull that content in, and you can use the SIG full and SIG light within the application.
Thank you, Mark. Franchesca, this question came in when you were speaking. You mentioned that you were able to reduce response time from internal clients on questionnaires. Can you tell us how many hours per week?
Absolutely. So with a team of 2 at the time when we began this process, we started to see a reduction of about 5 to 8 hours per week. It varies based on the volume that we have coming in for onboarding. But that is a huge deal because just for one of us, if it was just one of us doing the risk assessments, that's about a fourth of our time in 1 week that we were spending trying to chase people to get those completed. So instead of chasing people, we can now focus our energies on looking at the risk assessments and ensuring that they're properly risk ranked.
And then Franchesca, can you tell us more about some of the dashboards and reporting features that you use on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. So I didn't mention the dashboards in our presentation. However, they do have the dashboard capability. And today I use that heavily to have a high overview look on charts and reports of the requests that we receive on a monthly and daily basis to ensure that my team is responding timely, for one, and for two, just to ensure that I understand how much volume we're getting from a request perspective internally, which is a huge deal for us because it does help us if we ever need another resource because the volume is going up. We also use it for status reports on assessments, so we can actually track and monitor how quickly the internal clients and the external clients are responding on all of our assessments, as well as ensuring that they are responding. So if they're not responding, we can identify an issue with a no response very quickly and get ahead of that rather than reacting to it and having several phone calls about why this hasn't been done, things of that nature. We also have reports on the review and signature statuses and the contract expiration and renewals, which helps us look over all the contract details of when is this going to expire or renew? Do we need to go ahead and have conversations on the renewal? We do have notifications that are going out about the renewals and expirations today, which kind of help us get ahead of it as well because they tell us already what their decision is. Do they want to renew? Do they want to terminate? Do they want to allow it to expire? And what does that mean for next steps? And then, of course, assessment schedules. Assessment schedules, we're using that particular report today to help us build a schedule for us to know which risk assessments we need to reevaluate on an annual basis. So we do have some components of the ongoing monitoring in place today, and we are using them. We're just not using them for every level of risk that we have in our portfolio yet, which we're working towards that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and do one more question. Last one, can we prepare a new assessment from scratch?
Yeah, this is Mark Williams again. You can certainly do that within the application. It's very simple to do. As we discussed, we are a completely cloud-based SaaS solution, so everything is stored in the cloud, whether you're talking about the data that you're pulling back, including the attachments. We do host through CenturyLink, which is now 6 Tera, and also Microsoft Azure.
All right, thank you, Mark. Once again, I just want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. If there was any questions that you guys have asked that we did not address, one of us will be in contact with you guys shortly. Also, we will be sending a recording of the webinar via email to you guys within the next hour or so. Once again, thank you again for attending today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it.